Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kathleen Pletcher from FirstWorks, and we're very excited about tonight's creative conversation, Cartography, Mapping Our Journeys. Last week, we were really thrilled to begin live streaming cartography and really begin a 15-day kind of interaction with Kaneza Schall and Christopher Myers. One of the discoveries of this time is the power of conversation and how it can revive our connectedness. It can bring us intimacy, even though we're really missing gathering with you. So tonight widens the circle with members of the FirstWorks family and community in Providence, Rhode Island. We're grateful for the support of New England Foundation for the Arts, helping us connect this project with students and audiences, and also to Rhode Island Council of the Humanities for their real support of these kind of conversations and workshops that allow students and all of us tonight to explore the commonalities and the themes of migration. We have a rich conversation ahead, and if you have questions that you would like to see if we can address tonight, please put them in the Q&A of the Zoom function. We're recording this conversation, so we're thrilled to have so many of you join us, but also more will be. There's an afterlife, as I think we all know, to these live experiences. So I'm grateful to have Kaneza and Chris and Baha and Esun, but it's especially exciting tonight to have Avery Willis Hoffman, who is the inaugural artistic director of Brown Arts Initiative. And Brown is a longtime FirstWorks partner since the very beginning. Some of the most meaningful projects that we've done over the years. And I'm thrilled at the sparks that are already flying and the experience and perspective that Avery brings as she melds her world and vision with ours in Providence. So tonight is about journeys and storytelling, and I'd like to start. I will be leaving the five of you, but start by asking Avery to introduce herself and her story. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you to FirstWorks and all your staff for inviting me to moderate this conversation. And I'm just really thrilled to be with you all in the four-sided square of Zoom, but also in the amazing work of Kaneza and Christopher's cartography. And so I'm really pleased to be here tonight and welcome you all. As Kathleen said, if you have a question, please do put it in the Q&A and hopefully we can get to them at the end of this conversation. So I thought we would all just introduce ourselves so you all get a chance to meet each other and just tell us a little bit about who you are. And, I wanted to think about what brings us joy right now. What brings us joy and what's causing you concern? So maybe as you introduce yourself, think about those two things. So I'm Avery Willis Hoffman, as Kathleen mentioned. I'm the inaugural artistic director of the Brown Arts Initiative coming out of New York. I'm still in New York, so not yet in Providence, but enjoying these really early, wonderful conversations with community partners like FirstWorks and thinking about the future of the arts in Providence and at Brown. So I am very joyful to have adult conversations. I have two little ones and I feel like I am constantly in some baby talk world. And so I'm really looking forward to this hour with all of you. And my concerns are really deep about the future of the arts and how we can think about evolving our arts ecosystem into a new way of communicating, a new way of supporting each other and supporting our stories. So that's me. Maybe I'll turn it over to Kaneza, and then we'll go from there.
Glad to be here with you, Avery. My name is Kaneza Shaw. I make theater and I co-created Cartography with Christopher Myers. And one of my roles, I suppose, was director of the piece. Joy at this moment. Well, you know, it's such a strange time. We're in the bones of the country. We're in the bones of our psyches, and as artists, I feel like we're in the bones of our practices, and that has been giving me joy to have time in the actual core structures and what the ways of working need to be in order to share stories in the world the way that I want to, and in order to kind of create platforms for public exchange, and at this time what it looks like to seek representative audiences. So it's exciting to be here with Baha and Essen to kind of think about this particular locality that we get to have a creative exchange with around cartography.
For me, you know, as I designed and wrote cartography, but you know, for me, this strange moment that we're all in collectively, that is somewhat akin to a crisis. I feel like, you know, 2 years ago, if you asked 100% of Americans, do you know what a crisis is? Do you know what a cataclysm is? Do you know what a great shift in your psyche, in your community, in your world is? Many people wouldn't have any understanding of that. And probably even many of the people who said that they did would not have any understanding of that. But I feel like this last year has been a crisis. It has been a cataclysm that brings us all closer to this community of humanity that understands that our existence may be a little bit more tenuous than we had imagined. And I think that tenuousness, that those lessons that we learn, the reshifting of values that happens during these crises, I think that this is important. This is an inflection point around which we can sort of ask ourselves some of the big questions. And we're really excited to think about this piece, Cartography, which is about migration, about young people who are similarly at an inflection point, asking themselves big questions about what does it mean to survive crisis? What does it mean to define yourself in a world that is constantly trying to define you? And these are all questions that are near and dear to our hearts that we hope to share the exploration with each other.
Thank you. Essen, want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Essen Mirza. I'm very happy to be here. I've been affiliated with First Works in one way, shape, or form for a long period of time. I'm an immigrant from Pakistan. I'm a Muslim. I'm a physician. I work in the intensive care unit. Coming to America was a dream come true, good training, good life. That was the plan, and it has panned out that way. However, since 9/11, the narrative has shifted. So that narrative was being told to the people here in USA from multiple different sources. That put people like me, which are like almost 100% of the population here, in a box, a specific kind of a box, which made it very difficult for us to be on the grid. So like all of us, we went off the grid till it became clear that that narrative is going to permeate to the point that it's going to be multi-generational narrative, and our children and their children will be painted by that brush. and that narrative. So we decided to take a stand and come on the grid. And now one of the ways we did that was that we created artwork that was more than my religion, which basically brought in the artistic point of view of our existence as Muslims in this community. So in New England, especially Boston, larger Boston and Rhode Island area, we just collected all amateur artists and we had shows for them. We had 4 shows and COVID hit. But basic idea was that one show in Providence, one in Boston area and back and forth so that people could see us in a different light. It didn't matter whether we were physicians or bankers or bus drivers or librarians. We were all put in a certain box and we were not going to have that. Art transcended that. People started looking at us as normal human beings. And that became a good thing for us. So art has saved a lot of heartaches. It has saved us a lot of heartaches.
Thank you. And Baha.
Hi, good evening. So happy to be here with you all. My name is Baha Sad. I am also an immigrant from Iran and had a long journey. So it's going to take me a couple nights to just talk about the journey. But to answer your question, what brings me joy, I think I thought about that actually the other day. It's harmony. It's seeing people being happy, living together in harmony, and that really truly brings me joy. And I think when I think about my life in general, I've dedicated a lot of my life to humanitarian efforts, partially because that brings you that instant joy when you're working with people who need help, who appreciate the help that you are providing. So, and I also been fortunate to work at Dorcas International for the past 25, 23 years. And we work with a lot of immigrants, refugees, community members. So we really have this amazing community of people who just want to do good things or they want to accomplish things. So that's always, every day is a reminder that, we are doing, this life is moving towards something really valuable. And so that brings me joy to work here, work with you, talk to you. And another thing I wanted to mention, when Kathleen earlier mentioned something about the power of conversation, I remember 2 years ago, I was talking to Arminio Pinkway. I don't know if he's there in the audience or if you know, but he's the mastermind behind Big Nazo Puppets. I travel back and forth to Iran all the time, once a year. And I always, kind of miss one element that's in Iran and I can't find it here. And that is that you can always strike a conversation with a stranger. Obviously you have to speak the language, but even if you don't, you can kind of speak with a broken Farsi or whatever. And here I find it difficult because people are just so, and that's not just America, it's just, Western fast-paced life that people don't have time to stop and talk. And I feel like that's a major element that we're missing. So I was talking to Arminio, I said, let's start a piece that people can talk to each other. So it's like, what is this? Like, we're going to promote conversation. So it seems like such a foreign idea, but now Kathleen mentioned it, like the power of conversation, something as simple as that, I feel like is a big missing element in my life here in America. And I miss it because when I go to Iran, people, not much work gets done over there, but they do talk to each other all the time. So the productivity, they measure like maybe it's about 9 minutes or so, whereas here is like 8.5 hours. But I think it's very stimulating, and actually it reduces fear. It encourages people to think differently, and so I'm really glad to be here and have this conversation with you all.
Beautiful, thank you. Well, I thought I'd start at sort of a natural place, and maybe Keneza and Chris, you could just talk us a little bit through the development of cartography and your process, hopefully lots of folks in the audience have been able to see it, which is really wonderful. But maybe you could just paint a little bit of a picture for us about the project, and then we can kind of move into a conversation about it.
So in 2016, during the height of a certain wave of migration into Germany, Kaneza and I asked ourselves, well, what's the responsibility of artists when there's like a great social upheaval? And so we went to Munich. This is at a time when about 30,000 people a day were coming into Munich from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Somalia, Eritrea, just really the entire like circle of the Mediterranean. You could find someone who was coming from there. And we went there and we decided to work with unaccompanied minors. So we worked with about, it varied over the course of the time that we were there for around 6 weeks, 25 to almost 50 kids. Kids who had crossed borders, kids who had walked, who had taken boats, who had found a way into Germany from whatever situation that they were coming from. And we were interested in thinking with these young people about the idea of story. How did story function for them? Every border that they crossed, every border check, every map that they followed, every moment in which they had to explain who they were and where they were coming from, they had to use story as a passport. And we wanted to think story with these expert storytellers, these young people for whom story was a means of survival. And we wanted to think about that concept of story with them and how to tell that story and what kind of stories that we could share with each other about the importance of story, not only as a tool, but also as a direction, as an arrow, as a place that you're going to go. Because we found that with all of the young people that we met, it was as important the story of their future that they were writing as it was the story that they were asked to tell again and again of their past, right? So there were those young people who felt the need to kind of endlessly recount for the kind of aid community. We've all seen this, the exact kind of strife that they were coming from, but sometimes those kids didn't have a story for their tomorrow. And we wanted to kind of make the link of those stories. We wanted to talk about those stories as people who care very much for story, as well as we care for people like us who come from backgrounds in which immigration is 1-2 generations away. We wanted to think about story with these young people, and this was part of our impetus in making this work. Kaneza?
Yeah, and as we started formulating how we could continue the conversations that we were having with those young people and how we would invite more people in through the great collective form that is theater, we thought about creating a platform for all audiences to think about the histories of movement in their own lives, whether recent or many generations past. There's a amnesia that can come in the United States, where you might meet a young person in Cleveland who doesn't imagine that their family has come from anywhere. And so this opportunity for everyone to be thinking about the histories of movement that have brought us to this historical moment, and the all of the stories inside of that, and that in fact we all carry this story, and with a hope that if we can kind of connect some of that historical tissue and some of that memory tissue, we can think collectively about what we are building in the future we are building as a nation or as a world.
Thank you. And can you maybe just talk a little bit about these times and making art in these times? And I'd love to bring Essen and Baha into this as well. And you, both of you, have used art as therapy, as a a way to capture people's stories, to really help people through difficult situations. So maybe Kenneza, Christopher, just a little bit about making art in this time and translating this piece into what we can see on the screen now.
I think that I speak for all of us when we say that during this kind of moment of like kind of crisis and all of the moments of crisis that we've all experienced in our lives, I am surprised at the centrality of storytelling, the centrality of art. That the conversation everyone's having during this moment is, what are you watching? is such a common question, but also the way that how we tell the story of what has just happened to us is how we remember it. There's all scientists who study memory, and they say that you don't actually remember the thing that has happened. You remember the story that you have told yourself about the thing that has happened again and again and again. And I think that is one of the kind of lessons of this moment, is that we have to take charge of the stories that we tell ourselves. And as artists and as people who have gone through things in this world, that is the center of what we do, is we take charge of the narratives.
Thank you. Baha, maybe I turn to you. You mentioned in our sort of pre-conversation about using drama and theater as therapy. Could you talk a little bit about your experiences, your experiences in Providence, and your kind of interfacing with art on this front?
Right. So my background is also in the arts. I studied theater, film. I worked with youth back in Iran, in the Middle East with the Iranian Kurds and Afghanis. And when I started working in Providence, which is like 20, 25 years ago, at Dorcas International, I've always been meaning to bring arts to the population that we serve. And it was always, that really struggle of like, okay, how do we introduce the arts beyond like, what's, drawing is, so that it actually mobilizes them so that they can, express themselves in front of a group of people. And until like 2 years ago, we started working with Community Music Works, where they invited a clarinet player, Kenan Esmet from Syria, who played to our Syrian refugees. And I thought, the style that he was playing was a little too maybe classical. I wasn't sure if the population is going to connect with it, but they connected. Not only they connected, they started participating. Again, he plays with Yo-Yo Ma, so he's like world-class musician, and he plays like classical music, whereas most folks that we work with, they don't really have time to study arts at that level. So, but they got so engaged, they started writing poetry, and they started actually write very spontaneously. They started performing in front of people, and that became part of the show. And that made me realize, if you really figure out how to bring arts at its best to people who don't have time or didn't really have the advantage of studying arts or being exposed to art, because art seems to be like classified for sometimes intelligent people. Whereas, if you're able to work within some framework that they can figure out like how they can get involved in it, it was amazing. Not only was therapeutic, it really brought the community together who wanted to come together. People who are not from the Syrian community, they came in, and it was just, again, it was another environment where conversations happen. And I also am working with, we work with the unaccompanied minors. So I was really interested that was the population that you focused on. And when I first encountered the first unaccompanied minor in Rhode Island, which was like 7 years ago, she was no different than my own daughter. And the way she was so happy being here, showing me like, her paper, like ABCs, I was like, oh my God, she has gone through this horrendous, journey of getting here, and she's just so happy to be here. Some people need to hear that story. And so I started thinking about how can unaccompanied youth, kind of start telling their stories. but we really kind of went from the therapeutic aspect and, just, kind of using drama therapy so that we create a safe environment and they feel safe with each other and start telling their stories. But it was more like, having fun with theater, basically learning theatrical skills. And they loved it. But when COVID happened, we went virtual. So that really threw a wrench in our wheel. But at the same time, we realized like they found something really valuable in telling stories, and it was very therapeutic for them. And, with Zoom, there was a lot of difficult things that they had to overcome, such as living in overcrowded houses, but still they understood the concept of they're telling a story to a larger audience that's going to care. So to me, that was, and another thing that I noticed was that you really unleashing the imagination that they've had all along, because it's been with their hope and imagination has led them this far. If they didn't have that strong imagination that tomorrow will be a better day, they wouldn't have come this far, because they're true survivors. And once you kind of really tap in that imagination, you don't know how much it's going to flourish. I mean, they may start designing new cities, they may design new everything, so it's like, it really, I really appreciate what you've done, because I feel like we have to invest in their imagination, because it's their hope that has gotten to this place.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I thought, Essen, I'd turn to you. You're literally on the front lines right now, and so thank you for that. As a critical care physician, tell us a little bit about your experiences in Providence, in your life with this intersection of art and medicine, and the projects that you've been working on in the last few years.
So arts and medicine, there is art of medicine. You cannot take art out of anything, because if you take art of the context, then it becomes extremely black and white, and life is not black and white. Art brings the color into everything that we do. Every conversation that we have, every interaction we have, how we dress, there's ups and downs in the language, and it's what kind of clothes you wear and what's your background and everything. There's art in everything, and that's the universality of the language of art, whether it be music, whether it be visual arts or written art or whatever it is. My experience of art is twofold. One is for my own therapy. So when I'm doing my photography, which is my primary medium, I isolate myself from everything else. So it's only me and my camera. And it's extremely therapeutic, because it decompresses the tension and stress in my brain. I went to medicine to save lives, but it's an interesting concept to be in a room that has a patient with COVID in it. And the feeling of invincibility that used to be before COVID, or the vulnerability, that factor that came in after COVID, is an experience one should not experience. But anyway, that is kind of the thing for me, was a very, very therapeutic moment. And I don't use automatic cameras. I use either analog cameras, or my digital cameras are all manual. So I have to work with it. I make images, I don't take images. So that is my personal thing, and I like doing that. As far as the art in the community in Providence, Providence is a very unique place. It is just the right size. It's not too big, it's not too small, and everybody is 2 degrees of separation. Everybody knows each other one way or the other. So our ability to connect with the community was unbelievably amplified by connecting points like, say, FirstWorks. That as soon as we tapped into FirstWorks, like the whole universe opened up on the other end. the connectivity of people, and people over here by and large are extremely open to other ideas, other communities, and partly because of the legacy of Roger Williams, who came here to escape persecution. What was very interesting when we started the More Than My Religion project was how many Muslims, immigrant Muslims, were feeling the same thing that we were feeling, is that they were living under the radar, off the grid, just like not trying to become visible. But at the same time, a political movement was happening that was just boxing us all in this little corner of terrorists and undesirables. So when we started this project, and by the way, this was not my project, my friend Iram Haq from Massachusetts started this project, and we collaborated. So many people came up to us saying that thank you for giving us a forum, putting our face out there and all that. So it is, art is the language that drops the guard, and you can talk and communicate. You're talking about conversation, and art starts the conversation. So why did you create that piece? So why? And then you talk about it, and then you build bridges, and then you call them to your home, and maybe have food, and that takes it to the next level. So I think that in Providence we were able to do that just because of the right size in Providence, and I'm very, very fortunate and grateful for the community that we have developed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's such an important thing to think about. And I'm wondering, turning back to cartography, and Chris and Kaneza, what's your next step? What's your dream with this project, with projects that are coming up for you, as you hear the conversations and participate in conversations about the power of storytelling, which I know you both are so invested in. What's next? What's a post-COVID arts world look like for you? And maybe just dreaming a little bit for a minute, all of us, about what might come after this period of isolation, this period of heavy loss and really challenging times.
Yeah. Well, in terms of cartography, we have this incredible team of artists on the project that include all of the actors who have very kind of rich and personal histories around their own migrations and immigrations and seeking of asylum. And so we're excited that they will continue to hold the cartography conversation as it continues to tour. And Chris and I have many lives, but this particular Venn diagram that we're in today is thinking about young people and thinking about young people as kind of critical contemporary art audiences, and as people who are often at the forefront of the biggest questions in the world, and that the biggest questions of our times are so often most intensely processed by young people and through families. So as we come out of this COVID moment, one of the things that that I am struck by, and that Chris and I have talked a lot about, is the pressure of this time that has been on all of our heads and hearts, and the intensity of that pressure. I think being a teenager, being a school student right now, while your parents are working from home and who knows what else is going on in your life, the pressure on everyone has been huge, and I think I'm interested in the tools of solitude. What are the tools to spend time with ourselves? And for both the kind of internal work we want to do and the big structural change that we're all dreaming of, that some of these internal tools of being with ourselves is essential. So we've been thinking about a next performance that would center around how do we use theater to share the tools of solitude, to share the tools of spending time with ourselves well.
And that's that we're the way that that might manifest, and one of the many ways that might manifest is we've been thinking about doing work based on the poetry of Basho, the 1600s Japanese haiku, kind of master of the haiku. And really, we are interested in building spaces, more spaces like this one, where we can have conversations with peers, with friends, with people we haven't yet met, like Baha and Nasun. And that is what we have found is over this time, we all have had a shifting of our priorities, and we ask ourselves, what is important? And one of the things that we really believe is important is how do we foster community? And I think that that's why we've got involved in theater in the first place. I have a lot of other kinds of artistic lives. I'm a fine artist, and I do books for young people. But those other lives always center around the idea of how do you bring people together in a room? How do we find a way to, when you do a project like More Than My Religion or something like this, you're thinking about how do we bring people together in a room? And I think that's, and if that room is virtual, if that room is concrete, I think that that's central to all of the work that we're doing is, the importance of bringing people together in a room, some sort.
Yeah, thank you. Baha, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Like post-pandemic? Is that
What's your dream for a post-pandemic world?
Well, just being so fortunate working with immigrants and refugees and hearing their stories. So I personally have learned not to take anything for granted. So I just feel like there's a lot to learn of what just has happened. How do we make the most of it now? And many of our clients, many of our refugees and who, faced hardship, they understand it, they get through it. We had a family that arrived right in March, and she gave birth to her new baby in May, and she didn't step outside of her house, and she was cooped up in a refugee camp for like God knows how many years. And with all her dreams, she came to Rhode Island, and there was nothing. Her kids could not go to school until like September. So for 6 months, they were all cooped up, but they understood it. Then they try to make the most of it. So there was a learning moment for me that, how can people really understand this? This is no different than other difficult times that people go through, the wars that they go through. It's different because people are confused, they don't know how to deal with it. But another amazing thing is that a lot of people who were not accustomed to using electronic devices, it's just, now it's just, part of the necessities. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but it's just that the ability to adapt and learn and resiliency just shows a lot. And I'm just hoping that that has given us, I don't know, just the idea how to work with each other collaboratively, and the way organizations came together. It was, in all the years that I've lived in my life, I've never seen anything like that happen, especially in Rhode Island, like 17, 18, 20, 30 organizations all at once, coordinated efforts without any like massive meetings and all that. We figured out how to work together to serve the population without unduplicating services. So that in itself is a huge learning lesson. And I hope that will drive us to the next phase. And speaking of next phase, the new administration that's in Washington, they have promised that they're going to set the ceiling of refugees to 120,000 or 117,000. This year, in the past 4 years, almost like 40% of refugee resettlement agencies have closed. So we are, one of the lucky ones that and thanks to our supporters, we stayed intact. So I think we need to prepare for the incoming refugees and also unaccompanied minors. We are expecting as many as 120,000 unaccompanied youth in United States, and Rhode Island has probably 700 or 800, not thousands, but for Rhode Island being such a small state, we really need to build capacity. So I think for us post-pandemic is how best to build capacity based on all the things that we've learned in the past 30, 40, 100 years, and come up with a way of working together to welcome the new incoming refugees and immigrants, and work together, collaborate. Again, how do we make a collective impact that's best for everybody?
Yes, thank you. And just on that note, Baha, how do you feel like the arts and the arts community can help, not just create a safe space for these kinds of conversations and kind of dig into the difficult topics that we know we need to?
Yeah, I think again, with immigrants coming here, are you talking about this population, newcomers? So they're already a bit isolated, so I think arts help create that safe space. So we do have support groups, but it can be done in an art therapy format. Like, we've had like volunteers who work with Somali women, for example, that they do drawings or, things. So I feel like, there are many different sorts of arts, so whether it's storytelling, painting, drawing, music. So we always welcome arts, like, we work with Rhode Island School of Design and other people to, introduce arts to our students and clients and really help communities. That's really what it is. So I think we welcome it. That's all I can say. But it needs to be coordinated. And that's the lesson that I've learned. It really needs to be thought through, and every step of it needs to. So we need to invest in it. It just cannot be haphazard. Like, we have an artist here, let's do one. And it has to continue for a long period of time. Like, it repeats itself on at least once a week, twice a week, as opposed to, it cannot be just once a year, so.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Essen, turning to you, you, I'm sure, have a very particular view of what a post-COVID, is that even possible, I guess might be the first question, a post-COVID world, and where do you see the usefulness of arts and what you do? How can artists and artistic projects shine a light on the amazing work that you're doing in the community?
Yes, I do have a unique perspective because it's intimidating to see your patient die. And it's very sad. And we as a nation have seen almost 500,000 people die. And it is weighing heavily on the entire society. No matter no matter who it is, where they are, that fear that you might get COVID and you might get sick, or your parents may get it, whatever, that fear weighs heavily on you. There will be a post-COVID era. There will be. And it's soon. It might be as early as next year, or maybe in 3 years from now. I don't know, but there will be one. I really think that arts, and we will not have enough psychotherapists. We will all have to become our own psychotherapists, or community will have to raise this bar as far as helping each other out psychologically and emotionally. And there's no other better way to uplift people, or at least have them express their emotions, their feelings, than art. We have all seen children drawing when you go to refugee camps, especially war refugees. You should see the children when they put their thoughts on art, and it reflects their path, their journey, and it is therapeutic. Not many people can express themselves verbally, and when you take immigrant, the subtleties of the language does not translate into what they are trying to say. So it's a very complicated situation. So it's not just for immigrants. I think as a society, we would need to invest. As a country, we would need to invest. As a whole universe, we would need to invest in art, because we will be able to better express ourselves and able to say things what is in our hearts, um, because this is terrible what has happened. It is absolutely terrible, and it continues to happen, and we cannot push it under the rugs. The weight, the emotional burden on all of us when we meet somebody else without a mask, or we go to a mall, or we go to a shopping center, or we are in a bus, or we are in a school, we're trying to open the theaters or your cinemas. There's no escaping this fear at the back of your mind that maybe I will get it, or maybe I will take it to my mom. And this needs to be decompressed. And I personally think that art needs to be taught at every level in some way, shape, or form, because that is the only way, in my opinion, that we will be able to navigate the post COVID era in a sane environment. Otherwise, we will be at each other's throats because we will not have avenues to express ourselves, and it will come out as intense negativity. And that negativity has only one way of expressing, and we can't afford that.
Oh, so true. Thank you for sharing that. So I think we have a few minutes left. I just wonder, as we contemplate this moment that we're in, and thinking about this incredible work, that we're centering this conversation around, um, it's there's so many more things to talk about, I feel like. And I just wonder if we could turn to this question of storytelling again. And for the audience here tonight, what can we do to tell our stories? How can we, this is something I've been thinking about recently, about collecting the wisdom of our elders. What are the ways in which we as human beings on this earth can kind of preserve where we've come from, the ancestors who look down upon us and their stories and their journeys. What would you say to someone who maybe isn't an artist, who is interested in preserving that that journey, that familial journey? Maybe going back to Chris and Kaneza, just to think about what we personally can do in this time to hold those stories dear to us.
There's something about the keeping and the retelling, and I also think that any platform gives you a way in, and since we are all together, this moment of thinking our own histories of movement, and recognizing how these stories affect us. So my father's family is from Rwanda, from East Africa, and they fled in the 60s during the kind of first political upheaval, genocide, depending on whose terms you want to use. And the family went to Burundi, which is the bordering country. And as the story goes, my grandfather got up to the family, took the family. My grandmother's pregnant with my father, lots of other children. My grandfather got up the next day, went into the forest, picked bananas, and took them to the market to sell them. And as he was passing, a bunch of his friends were sitting at the kind of, I don't know how the word translates, but like roadside bar essentially. And they were laughing at him, and they were like, "Why are you being crazy? We're gonna go home in a couple weeks. Calm down, sit down, have a beer, calm down." But he would get up every morning and sell his bananas, and then eventually got enough materials to make banana wine, and then eventually to buy a small motel, and that became kind of the anchor of our family's history, this building in of resilience, and a sense that all of the stories going around were, oh, we'll go home so soon, and no one repatriated until after the genocide in the 1990s, and created this kind of intricate lace of comings and goings. But I feel like no matter where the stories sit, it's the it's the retelling of them. It's the retelling of them, and knowing what they mean to us, and kind of holding on to whatever moves us forward. And I also think in some way we remake those stories every time we tell them, and to embrace that sense of remaking that we are all constantly involved in. I think that is maybe the way through, is that we're holding the ancestors in every way we can, and it's also our job to make these stories actively.
And to realize that what we have is stories. What's really interesting is if you're young people, or you always find this with young people, but we find this with adults too. If you go to your parents, if you go to your grandparents and you say, tell me the story of, so often our parents, our grandparents, they say things like, oh, there's nothing really to tell. That wasn't really a thing. Kinesa's grandfather, I'm sure, did not see this moment of ingenuity and discipline and focus as like a story that needs to be told. I'm so sure that he, like my grandfather, like all the grandfathers and grandmothers, thought, well, this is what had to be done at the time, and so I got it done. But to realize that, like, what we are doing is living our stories now. This is a story. Think about how you will tell your grandparents, how you will tell your grandchildren, how you will tell your nieces and nephews about your life now, and to realize that in and of itself is of great value. And that is how you teach the next generation that their lives are important as well. And I think that sense of recognizing that we are in the midst of living our stories, even when we're, pounding bananas into banana wine, that in and of itself is the important gift that we need to give ourselves.
Yes, thank you. Baha, are there any stories that sit with you that you would like to share that keep you going during these challenging times, that might be inspiring to others as well?
Well, I think that a new story is being developed. It's like there's so many stories, like, when Ehsan was talking about, it's like the interactions that we have on a daily basis through Zoom, and just new discoveries and all that. To me, it's an avalanche of stories that are coming at me personally. And I feel like, how do we, like, I've been able to touch base with a lot of the different theater groups that I work with. So we have like, virtual play readings, and, so we develop stories together. And actually one of the workshops that we did with the unaccompanied youth was that they collectively, they call it devised theater, they collectively worked on developing a story. So I feel like story is like what really makes our communities come to life and focus on something, and creates a dialogue in a healthy way. So I don't really have a particular story to tell you, except the fact that I feel like we're in the midst of making a new story for humanity.
Yeah, I love that. Ehsan, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think storytelling is extremely important. And part of the thing is that we need to realize that we need to be proud of where we come from. The issue becomes when your heritage becomes looked down upon. And that then inhibits the fresh immigrants from telling it to their children, because they're afraid that their children will be ostracized or put aside because of their heritage and their background. And that needs to be discouraged at every level. That basically you want to make sure that everybody's story is respected and appreciated and loved and promoted. Like my wife is big on preserving recipes, heritage recipes from her mother and my mother's side and everybody. And based on that, we have this little group called Abraham's Tent, where Jews, Christians, and Muslims and Hindus, we come together around table. and we made food, we make food and share our personal stories and all that stuff. So it's very important that anybody who is creating a little bubble that they are the chosen one or they are the ones and everybody else is bad, that particular mindset has to be actively pushed aside and put down, because everybody is good and everybody has a little thing to share and make our community stronger and better and more vibrant and more rich. Every one of us. Together we are strong, united we stand, and divided we fall. And there's a reason for that saying. And that starts from the fact that if Kanisa has to say something from Rwanda, then Rwanda is great. I mean, they have some awesome art and awesome cultural heritage and whatever. Or Taha has to say some stories from Iran. I mean, Iran is like 2,000-year-old, 2,500-year-old civilization. Come on, they have stories. But now, because of a certain political uh, backlash about whatever, everything is bad. No, it's not bad. It's great. I mean, like there's a certain part of it that's not good, but the stories are beautiful. The recipes are beautiful. Food is great. Art is great. So we need to actively make sure that when somebody is saying those people are bad, well, we need to stand up to that and say, no, those people are not bad. That person may be wrong, but the people are not bad and their stories are not bad, and they everything that they believe in is not bad. And that is my point of view. Is when I meet somebody, I say, man, you're good unless proven otherwise.
That's such a great moment to pause this conversation. I see Kathleen is back with us. Do you want to add anything or add a question, or I turn it back over to you?
Thank you. My presence means that we are coming to a close, but have just a few moments left, and I feel like we have heard credos and personal stories and paths forward, and it just makes me think so much, although some of us know each other already, when strangers meet. And the idea in Iran that you would stop and talk and have a conversation, that beautifully stays with me. So I just feel so energized by you all coming together. One kind of closing question that surfaces that I think in a lot of ways we've heard, but here is this time of pandemic, this time in the US of political change, and with the idea of imagination, do you have the imagination, the hope that the way immigrants have been seen as outsiders, that there's the potential for transformation to be seen as the foundation, as what makes us rich? And maybe that's a question with hope in it, but I wondered about that possibility of moving from outsider, or Essen, I think you talked about being put in a box and then going off the grid, but outsider instead really being kind of the pillar, the foundation in terms of immigrants. And I'm not as skilled as Avery to say who might answer that. So with me, I think this is a kind of free-for-all close.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I
yes.
Like and I feel like one of the ways through is that sense of holding all of this history in ourselves, that this outsider position is actually something that we all hold, whether it's a recent coming into, or whether it's many generations past. But that feels like one of the ways that we can mend that fabric that you're talking about. And I think what Essen was saying about this story gap and what does it mean for parents and for generations who have passed through tremendous struggle and difficulty to brave that story gap and pass stories forward is so tremendous. And I think that that's a huge bravery that we actually rely on in this, is for those generations to choose to go into that place and not let that story gap pass into new generations. So I love holding that at the end of this conversation.
Yeah, if I can add, I think, you know, America is, there's always that struggle, like, you know, we want to have democracy, but at the same time, you know, we want to hold on to, we don't want to, you know, open our doors to people coming in, and we want to maintain control. But I feel like the writing is on the wall, because America is designed for people from different cultures to come together. It's the foundation of this country, to come together and create a new design and come up with new structures. So I think, you know, what we went through in the past, I don't know whether it's 4 years or however many years you want, it's just a process. It's, you know, to become truly a multicultural country, community. So I think there's definitely, that's going to happen.
Well, this seems like a beautiful place to bring us to a close. I want to say that the conversation last week and what has unfolded since have really given rise at FirstWorks to some very, you know, forward thinking or future projects in terms of youth and young people and their stories and their stories of their heritage. Cartography, for anyone who is listening, who is a student, knows a student, is an educator, is still available until March 12th. You still can see it on demand. And we're continuing at FirstWorks conversations about activism and art next week. And I hope you join us. But thank you to the 5 of you, Avery, you know, for bringing us together in this kind of a crucible of conversation. I am very moved and, you know, very honored that you've given your time and your beliefs and your thoughts and your openness to sharing them.
Thank y'all, and thank you so much, you guys, for sharing yourselves. I hope you guys enjoy cartography. I hope that we can all continue these conversations at home with our loved ones, with each other, with ourselves. I'm excited. Thank you.